Jamie?
I'm voting in favour of us having a future. I'm voting in favour of us getting audit sign-off. One of the fundamental jobs of a council is to actually put together a budget. I know that sounds relatively straightforward, but maybe it is news to some. Finding a way to actually pay for X with Y is simply how you balance the books. If you don't have audit sign-off, you don't have a budget. If you don't have a budget, well, you don't really have a democracy or a city, because you might as well pack up and go home because you've failed as a council. I believe that as a council we haven't failed. I believe as a council we've worked very well together to put together a plan which isn't going to please all the people all the time, as Ellie said, but I think it is an across-the-board compromise. I think that it's very cognizant of the fact that recovery isn't about one thing. I believe that the fundamentals to what the citizens want, aside from the fundamentals of putting together a budget that a council needs to do, is that they want the basics done. They want the toilets to flush, they want the water to run, they want the roads to be fixed as soon as possible. And I think you need to make sure that that's happening first and foremost, and your energies are going into that. But then there are other things around that. That's the seat of the chair, but there are legs that hold that up, and that's an economy, that's the infrastructure, that's culture. There's a whole. It's about having an affordable city. No one aspect on its own, as important as it may be, any use if you don't have the rest. I've said this before, but you know, having the finest flushing toilets in the Southern Hemisphere doesn't mean that we've recovered. If you've got no one living there to actually flush those toilets, then it was a bit of a waste of time. You've got to have an economy that underpins that. You've got to know that people can get jobs there. A job's important? Yeah, absolutely they are. But then you need to be able to have a house to live in so you can actually go to work. You need to have a street that you can actually drive on or cycle on or walk down to be able to get to that job. Is there lots of available sections in Gore? Yes, there is, but there's a declining population. There are so many aspects that need to be coupled together to try and find that equilibrium. And that's what we strive for. That's the job that we try to do every day when we have those decisions and we have those debates, because there's no one answer. It's about people's judgment calls with their experiences and their knowledge and their expertise to work together and try and find out where that sweet spot is for the city. I believe that we can put together a plan today and have this passed. It meets audit sign-off and it delivers a huge amount of what we need to deliver as a city to have a good quality of life today, a good quality of life tomorrow, and a future that when Jasmine and I get married and we have children, that hopefully our future children then will be as proud of Christchurch as we are, because this is what it's about. It's a 10-year plan. It's about setting down that vision. I am proud that we're actually going to be 2% cheaper, a 2% lower rates rise than what Auckland City has just signed off. I wanted less than that. You know, you can't please all the people all the time, and there's nothing about this plan that pleases me entirely. I get that though. I would have liked to have seen lower rates there, but it's still 2% of a lower increase than Auckland. And we've had one of the worst natural disasters in the history of the world. We're at the stage of recovery where the rubber hits the road, and we have so many challenges, and we're putting together something which is 2% cheaper, or a 2% cheaper increase than the city in New Zealand, which is the one that's larger than us, the largest city in New Zealand. The only thing that I'd like to add to around this is I fundamentally don't think that the citizens of this city get caught up in the People's Republic of Christchurch or anything like that so much. I actually think that it's pretty basic. They just want to know that what they want is going to be there. I don't think they give a hoot about who owns it. When I go to a car park building, I want to know that there's going to be availability. I want to know that there's going to be an affordable price to get that service. And I don't think it really matters who owns it. I don't think that necessarily a contracting company, you have perhaps City Care that is listed on paper as doing the Avon River precinct, but it's actually subcontractors that are doing it. You've got Johnston's Contracting is what you'll see there. So it's not actually any one company that's necessarily delivering those things. I don't see the ownership of the companies so much as the strategic element. I think you've got to look at the big picture of this and what makes a strategic asset strategic. Is it just the fact that you just want to say that you own it because it's the People's Republic? Or is it the fact that you can ensure a quality of a product or service for the people of this city that you're there to help? And I believe that we call items strategic because they deliver a benefit. So if you can deliver that benefit to the people of Christchurch, I think it's irrelevant who does it. I'll be 20 more seconds and wrap this up. Ultimately, I think that we're a council of partnerships, and I think that around the car park buildings, whoever is delivering it, as long as something is delivered for our people, that's all that matters. You get out of bed to make this place a better city, and I think we're doing that with this plan. Finally, I didn't agree with the likes of the removal of the Northern Arterial. I actually didn't agree with the removal of Enable as a strategic asset, because I see it as the Orion of the future. I see it as the effectively the key core strategic power port of the city, data port of the city, if you will. But be that as it may, we've worked together, we've got a plan there, and I want to thank all of my colleagues that I've worked with over this time, the auditors, the staff that have put in so much work, and also the Mayor, who stood on a platform of unity, and I think she's done that really well. We haven't agreed all the time at all around the table, but I think that we have been united, and I'm really proud of that, and I'm proud of what Leanne's done over her time as Mayor so far. So you've got to be a big boy about this, and you win your battles along the way and you lose your battles along the way. I won some, I lost some, but at the end of the day, now you either sign off a plan and deliver as a council, or you don't, and now you endorse the plan together, and I think that would send it as a superb signal. I didn't get everything along the way, but that's fine. We now need to sign it off and do really the one thing that you need to do as a council, and sign off a budget. So I'd urge you all to support that as we've had the debates along the way. So thanks to everyone, and yeah, let's get the job done, get on with it.
Okay. Glenn.
Thank you. As a ward councillor, I'm delighted to see the affirmative action taken towards New Brighton by way of an additional $3 million into the master plan. It took me 3 attempts to get this council to adopt a master plan for Christchurch, partly caused by the fact that there was only one ward councillor for Burwood Pegasus for a while the other stood down, and I couldn't get the support at the time. But I'm delighted that money will now flow to promote that plan. I believe that once the east recovers, the city recovers, and when the east is transformed, the city will be too. As a city councillor, I'd like to vote for this plan. The key financial covenant, we have the net debt to revenue ratio upon which our financial strategy is rested, and which we cannot exceed 250%, is now projecting a peak of 211%, giving us the $300 million headroom, twice the amount as Councillor Buck said before. I'd like to vote for this plan because the Great for Christchurch initiative will save $178 million over the life of the plan, much of that due to our good procurement policy enabling good whole-of-life cost savings. The only policy this council had prior to this was a tender policy which was so short I could have tweeted it to you. But this policy enables whole-of-life cost savings. It's also the visible expression of this council's transparency. I'd like to vote for this plan because the net interest expense reduction following reduction in interest revenue over the life of the plan is projected to be $194 million. I'd like to vote for this plan due to the projects in the city, including those in which we are tied up with our cost share partner. Because they are significantly behind schedule, we are making savings. As you see on page 114 of today's agenda, and I quote, the rebuild of facilities included under the cost share agreement are significantly behind schedule. Any delay in delivery reduces our borrowing and operating costs. Wittingly or unwittingly, our cost share partner is negotiating themselves and by association us, the cost share agreement. They are unable to meet their own deadlines over the anchor projects, the multi-sports complex being a case in point. In the first 3 years of this plan, our commitments there were to be $15 million, $50 million, and then $50.5 million. Now, due to that delay, the commitments for us are $520,000, $36 million, and then $37 million. A trend is emerging with them, whether it's with the projects in which we are tied up, such as the multi-sports stadium or the earthquake memorial, or those they want to do, such as the convention centre. They can't get them across the line in time. By the time the multi-sports stadium is built, QE2 will have been running for 2 years and due for a repaint. Expect delays to continue. For our part, delays are caused by planning, and I've been advised that we are addressing that. For our cost-share partner and others in this city, as we've seen, delays are caused at pre-construction, particularly around developing business cases and moving from procurement to construction. Even if these issues are ironed out soon, the delays will remain. Construction prices will increase in the meantime. They were 1.5% a month 2 years ago, undoubtedly much higher now, causing projects to be revised, resulting in less pressure on our financial strategy as far as we are tied into projects with the Crown. I would have liked to have voted for this plan on the basis of that evidence that things will get better. But Wednesday was the tipping point for me, because following a more than reasonable amendment from Councillor Turner, which was that any release of capital in years 2 and 3 of the LTP occur only as absolutely necessary, by means other than the sale of companies or shares in companies, and only after a thorough, aggressive and far-reaching review and reprioritisation of all aspects of the capital program, with the expectation that all budgets will be fully interrogated and reductions proposed where possible. The Council still resolved to take assets off its strategic assets list, apart from the port, the airport and Orion, notwithstanding that one of the now apparently non-strategic assets, CityCare, had a dividend payment in 2014 higher than the port, 5.7 million, over and against the port's 2 million, and comparable to the airport's 6.6 million. But now apparently, and amazingly, it's non-strategic. That resolution by this council enabling it to sell down or off assets without going through a special consultative procedure leaves us exposed to review, diminishes our transparency and undermines our democracy, all because of this persistent, feverish desire to sell down or off assets, taking the line of least resistance. In kayaking terms, we call it taking the chicken route because it's easy. In the face of factual evidence, the will of our community, by 4-1, 83%, the sense of loss of control over its assets is noted in the agenda, this council still chooses to ignore that. On that basis, I cannot support this recommendation.
Thank you. Like a few around this table, it's an odd thing to say, I'm not a politician. This is the first time I stood as a councillor, and I stood as a councillor, I got in, I should say, because I wanted to get the city up and running. And one of the reasons I wanted to get the city back up and running is I'm a one-eyed Cantabrian, my family is, and I hope that one day when my children spread their wings and fly, they will fly far and they will fly high, but one day they will come back and nest in this city. And to do that, we've got to make some hard decisions. And I'm sorry the term is used, chicken route, because no decision around this table made by anyone or debated has been a chicken route, I believe. I'm really proud that we've managed to keep rates as low as they have. If you look at Auckland signing off at 9%, we are recovering from a natural disaster, and we have done this. I think that this whole city can be proud. I'm really proud that we've kept community funding at previous levels. We heard people talk about the most vulnerable in our city. That is a far wider term than it was before. So I'm really pleased with that. Through the hearings, we listened to submitters, and we really understood that the three key assets were Orion and the ports, and they are strategic, there's no question about that. But we also heard through that hearing people wanted things. Right across the board, people wanted. And you could look at it negatively and say that was selfish, but when we talk about resilience and when we talk about vulnerable, we talk about our whole communities. We're looking through this plan of putting pools in New Brighton and investing in New Brighton and the east. We're looking at a pool in Woolston, we're looking at pools in the southwest. These are things that our communities really need. Not only do we need that infrastructure repaired, but we need to be moving forward as a city. We need to repair those footpaths, but we also need to put that that value back into the resilience we talk about rather than despair. When you see something positive happen, it gives the city and the people in the city a lift. So I think we've really got to move forward. We've heard about the returns and the dividends over the last 10 years. Well, we're here and we're now, and we've got to make some decisions. And they are hard decisions, and I'm really proud to be sitting around this table with the people that I am moving forward. And so I am supporting the Mayor's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Raf.
Thank you. I stood for council on a simple platform of finance, community and strategy. I believe with all the hard work we've done over the last year, we've solved our financial problems. We have a clear strategy and a defined pathway for further examination of our expenditure and our revenue plans. As mentioned, our debt profile is much better than expected. We have cut operating costs and we have prioritised our capital expenditure. We have more to do in that department, and that job begins next week. We have opportunities to look at our debt structure and see if we can lower our funding costs. And it's clear that we have multiple options around our capital release programme, many of which will not involve equity sales. So I'd like to thank Peter and the finance team for all the hard work they've done in this area and the continuing work that they will do. I'm really excited by the progress we have made with our engagement with our communities. We have signalled very, very clearly our desire to empower them to make decisions about issues that concern them. We have proposed a new community currency, which will provide another way to support our local economies, provide payment for community contribution, and build a more diverse financial platform. We have also looked at how we can work with communities to help them deliver projects and outcomes that they both want and have the ability to deliver and manage themselves, whether it's jetties, walkways, parks, playgrounds, whatever they choose. I'm reminded of a well-known Ronald Reagan quote, where he said, "The one sentence you should be afraid of hearing is, 'Hello, we're from the government and we're here to help.'" What I want our organisation to be saying is, "Hello, we're from the council, how can we help?" That is how we want to engage with our communities. I'd like to applaud Carleen and her team for their clear intention to make the council an enabling and responsive organisation that serves the community. I've been involved in strategy development for a long time, and essentially it boils down to this: where do you want to go and how are you going to get there? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. We must be clear where this city is going and how we are going to take it there. The challenges are numerous: infrastructure, housing, climate change, immigration, financial markets. These are big global issues, but they affect us locally. How do we regenerate and build resilience into our city? How do we recreate a city that supports its citizens' health and well-being? Because in the end, that's what it's all about. But as all these challenges are difficult, they're also great opportunities. How can we develop more affordable housing? How can we build smarter and more resilient infrastructure? How do we respond to the issues of flooding and heavy rainfall? How do we get the right creative talent to move to our city and stay? How do we develop a more sustainable financial system and affordable rates, which is a key issue for many of our community? Now that this long-term process is out of the way, thankfully, we need a really good conversation about how we develop a compelling vision for our city and how we deliver it. With that in mind, I urge you to support the Mayor, and I should say at this point that she has done an incredible job in tremendously difficult circumstances. I urge you to pass this long-term plan and get on with the job, our job, of taking the city into the next phase of regeneration and long-term resilience.
Thank you. Just to conclude the debate, I wanted to make one point to start, and that is that the foundation of a democratic society is one which relates and is accountable to its citizens, and this starts with strong local government. And this LTP puts us in a strong position as a council to stand on our own 2 feet. We haven't been able to do that up until now because constantly we've been in a position of expectation around insurance recoveries, expectation around further government contribution to our horizontal infrastructure spend. But those expectations are not something that we can base our long-term plan on. And as we said right from the outset, because we don't know what we don't know at this point, we have to make this LTP a base case. That's all it is. It's a starting point. It's a platform for the next phase of our development as a city. And I do want us to think positively and optimistically about what we can leave as a legacy, because I don't want our legacy to be a constant refrain about the financial challenges that we have to confront. I want to think of the disaster that has happened to our city to actually be an opportunity to do things that we never thought we could do before. I would like the legacy of our term of office to be a new way of doing local government. I would like to see governance change in our city in a way that is empowering and enabling and not directive and controlling. And I think that people might hear what I'm saying when I'm saying that. So I do want to talk about how important it is that we don't stand on the sidelines criticising those that went before and those who made decisions based on the best possible information that they had at the time, and actually made decisions when neither of them understood what the other's position truly was. And so I will list the challenges that we certainly did get blindsided by. I know that the Deputy Mayor has highlighted some of those, but signing obligations to fund anchor projects regardless of insurance recoveries, but assuming full recovery for those assets in the 3-year plan would have failed the audit process that we are required to meet in establishing a long-term plan over 10 years. So the 3-year plan was not an accurate document in that regard, and it would have failed the audit test that we're obliged to pass. Assuming that the horizontal infrastructure component of the cost-sharing agreement would include reinstating all damaged infrastructure when specific reference was made to eligibility under the Civil Defence and Emergency Management arrangements. And I remember David East and I going to the Civil Defence and Emergency Management plan to try and get an assessment of what eligibility actually meant. But there is no question that the people who signed the cost-sharing agreement for the council believed that all of the earthquake-damaged infrastructure was covered by the cost-sharing agreement. And it has been a shock to a number of people within the organisation to find that that was not what was signed up to. But there is further discussions that we need to have with central government in that regard. So it's not the end of that particular story. It just means that we can't include it in our long-term plan. Not being clear enough about underinsurance. I mean, I don't know why anyone thinks that the rest of New Zealand should pay the price for our underinsurance. Why should we pass on to the taxpayers of New Zealand what was fundamentally a flawed process internally? It doesn't matter who is to blame. The truth is who is responsible. And we have to step up and take responsibility for the financial situation that we are in. During the process of bringing in Corda Mentha and Cameron Partners, we've been able to assess our financial position in a way that has really assisted the process of the long-term plan. But one of the documents that I found, and there were 2 documents that I was particularly interested in, the first document that they found for us was a Treasury paper advising Ministers Brownlee and English in November 2011 about what would be the basis for a cost-sharing arrangement with Christchurch City. And this is where the New Zealand would come to the party in terms of supporting Christchurch. And these were the principles: consistency with recovery, The financial pressure on the council from cost sharing should be such that it economises, innovates and restricts its expenditure to high value users, but not such that it is unable to play a full role in the recovery. So that was a direction to the council to economise, to innovate and restrict expenditure to high value uses. Fairness. Both the Crown and the council are under pressure and costs should be shared fairly between these parties. Durability. The arrangement should leave the Crown and council with sustainable finances in the short, medium and long term. Therefore, the analysis of cost-sharing options should be more focused on the overall impact on council and Crown finances rather than on component cost-sharing elements. I think you're seeing where the mistakes were made, because actually the principles are great, but it's not how it was applied in practice when it came down to component cost-sharing elements. Incentives. Cost-sharing should incentivise prioritisation. That's what we have to do. We have to prioritise our work. Accountability and value for money. Specifically, cost-sharing should include good performance measures to track recovery progress. Most importantly, both parties need to make a more than nominal contribution to costs to effectively manage these costs. And so the principles were laid out at the end of 2011. At the end of 2012, the Crown did a full assessment, or had completed a full assessment of the council's financial position. And it was clear that additional capital funding for the council was required, $740 million. Everyone knew the scale of the problem back then. That was December 2012, but there was no public transparency about the challenges that the council was being asked to take on. It's a shame that people were allowed to run for election not knowing the truth of the reality that we would have to confront. And it seems to me that one of the things that we do with this plan is put it all out in the open. There is nothing to hide. It is all now crystal clear. And what we are doing is we are allowing the next team of people who sit round this table or who put themselves forward for public office to actually do so in the full knowledge of the financial challenges that the council has, and the fact that the council has the capacity within its own asset base to address those issues. And there is nothing in passing my resolution today that says that we are selling core infrastructure assets. What it requires is, if it is needed, the release of capital that shows that we can maintain a balanced budget. That is what my resolution would enable. Now, but the thing that I really want to talk about is actually not about the finances. I kind of believe that there's been a lot of discussion around that today. I want to talk about what people came to talk to us about that weren't here as part of a campaign that was generated. These were the people who came with the heart of their communities to the fore. Whether they were communities of place, whether they were communities of identity, or whether they were communities of interest, they called on the council not to do things for them. They called on the council to partner with them in a whole new way of doing local government, whether it was to rebuild a jetty or whether it was to develop a strategic overview for the arts. It was do it with us, not do it for us. And several networks like Creative Communities offered to help the council tackle the wicked problems of our age, from homelessness to preparing for the impacts of climate change. Their submissions highlighted the enormous talent and knowledge base we have in Christchurch and their willingness to share it with the city. We've been asked to join a time bank, something which could be a precursor to a new way of paying rates, as we've heard. The Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce quoted Harvard's Dutch Leonard, who said, "We need to be thinking about riding the great tailwinds of our time." Life's changing. I mean, things are going to be so different. Are we going to have buses in the way that we have buses? I mean, the taxi industry around the world has been completely thrown into disarray by Uber. And will we have an Uber bus system in the future? I mean, we don't know how things are going to change, and yet we're making major infrastructure decisions based on the way the city is now, and yet we have an opportunity to build for the future. I mean, I honestly think that we should be working with our community and thinking about different ways. And actually, we should be leading the way. We should be the most sustainable city in our country. But unfortunately, we're involved in decisions, or decisions have been made to knock down buildings that are perfectly repairable. The Chamber also said that the underpinning focus for our future has to be placemaking, not building buildings, and that's what brings people to the equation. I found the Chamber's submission to be incredible. They said we need to create dynamic planning models supported by nimble delivery using multiple financing models, phased processes and incremental improvements. And they set out some principles that give a framework for investment decisions. They said decision-making had to be open and transparent. They said Crown and Council should operate as a partnership. They said a city with a thriving central core needed well-connected suburbs. So it's not just about the central city, it's about connecting it all. Builders has capacity to allow for growth, learn to live with water, and we want our eastern suburbs to flourish. And I think that what they've managed to sum up in their submission are the challenges that our city has had to confront, but this is an opportunity for us to put in place, really, a line in the sand, that this changes everything, that we have in place a long-term plan which says we can stand on our own. We don't need to have additional support from outside. That doesn't mean we won't be asking for it. I certainly will. But what it does say is that we have the capacity to take on the leadership role that this city elected us to undertake. As we move into the transition phase, which has been announced, we're not far away from a transition recovery plan being put into the public arena. And I will be very interested to see whether the people of Christchurch think that we are ready to take on that leadership role. And I hope that this decision enables us to do just that. And on that note, I will put the motion and we'll put the screen up. So those in favour press yes, those opposed say no. And that is carried. Thank you very much. And we have another set of resolutions, which I believe we can move as a block.